Isn't springtime so much fun after such a long winter? Finally seeing the flowers and the blossoms and green grass pop out just gives me some sort of renewed energy. So today, if you're looking for the best way to draw and paint some springtime tulips, then this tutorial is for you. So let's not waste any time. Go grab your watercolor supplies and let's get to painting. I have here my watercolor paints, some clean water, a paper towel, and then of course some watercolor paper. Now I already have my drawing pencil lightly onto my watercolor paper, but I have several options on how you can do this. First up, if you'd rather not take the time to draw this for yourself, I do have this outline available in my Etsy shop that you can print out and trace right onto your watercolor paper and get right to the fun of painting without wasting any time. I'll even put this on a discount for 1 week in case you'd like to give that a try. Now, some people though really enjoy freehand painting much more than using an outline, and that's okay too. You can actually paint this freehanded as well. In fact, let me pull out my little sample sheet. This was just my practice test paper. I did this completely freehanded and it turned out great. So if you choose to do it this way, then all you're going to do is basically follow the same shapes that you're going to see me painting today. You just won't have that outline as a guide. If outlines are helpful to you, but you don't want to use the one that I have in my Etsy shop, then we do have another option. You can draw this for yourself. This is a fairly easy drawing to do. So let me pull out a different piece of paper and I will show you some really basic things, and you can create your own composition and have as many or as few tulips as you want. You have the creativity and artistic freedom to do whatever. Okay, let's try drawing some tulips. Now, the easiest way that I found to draw a tulip is to start with a large U shape. After that, then we can begin forming the petals. There are several ways that you can do this. A really easy way is to basically do an S or a curve mark from the top of the U shape down to the bottom that kind of splits the U in half. Then I'll add another sort of triangular shaped petal off to the left side here, and then I'll finish the edge off with a small petal on the far left side using that original U shape. And then you can add another triangle shape in the back between the two, and voila, really simple and yet a beautiful tulip. Now, like I say, there are many ways you can do this, so let's try another tulip and we'll draw this one a little bit differently. I will start again with the basic U shape, but this time to create a slightly different look, let's draw an oval or an egg-shaped petal right in the center of this. Then from there, we'll form some petal shapes using the outer U shape coming in towards the center petal. To finish it off, we'll add a couple of triangular shapes more in the background. And then there's another great easy tulip to do, but it also looks different than the first. And like I say, you can have as many of these tulips as you want to in whatever position or direction that you like. Now, the rest of the drawing is fairly easy. We'll come back in here and add in some simple lines for the stems of the tulips, maybe making it slightly wider right where it touches the tulip itself. Then we can add in some really simple tulip leaves as well. I'll start this by drawing in a shape that basically looks like a blade of grass, and then to create some dimension and depth, I'll make it thicker by adding in another line off to the side of this, and we have a lovely tulip petal. I'll draw another one of these off to the other side facing in the other direction. Another choice you have here is just to make a painting with only tulips, but I wanted to change things up a bit and add in some twigs or little branches with some buds on them, just to add to the composition. So all I'm going to do here is draw a squiggly line, maybe in between the two tulips, and then off to the sides of that line, I'll draw in some little bud shapes. Now, just like the tulips, you can add in as many or as few of these budding twigs as you like. They are all going to be drawn in the same way. And there we have it, a really simple and easy outline drawing, and I really feel like anybody could do this. You can use your artistic freedom to create your own composition. You could make this into cards or bookmarks or whatever you want. But enough of that, let's go ahead and move on to the painting. So I'm going to pull out my watercolor paper once again with my outline drawing on here. I've kept my drawing pretty light in value so that I don't end up with a lot of pencil marks in the end. Let's go ahead and pull out some brushes that we can use for the painting today. I think I'll use a number 6 round for the larger petals or grass areas, maybe a number 3 round for the little buds, and then I think I'll pull out this thin number 1 rigger brush as well for the branches and twigs. And just as a side note, these brushes are back in stock. I'll leave a link for them along with my Etsy shop link and links and information for any of the other products you see me using today in the description of this video if you're interested in looking into anything further. All right, let's go ahead and tape our paper down with some artist tape. This can help a little bit with the warping, plus it helps me make sure I don't move my paper out of the camera shot. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get some colors ready on our tray that we can use for the tulips. Now, of course, you have the option to paint these in whatever colors you'd like. Tulips come in all different hues. Today, I think I'm going to try a dual color tulip, so I'm going to pull out some cadmium orange here first. I'm going to water this down just a little bit so it is slightly lighter in value. Then I'm going to pull out some alizarin crimson to complement the orange, and as I pull this out, I'm really going to keep it concentrated and darker in value. This is going to be the main color that dominates the overall look of the tulip. Now, using the number 6 round brush, let's go ahead and start painting in some of these petals. I'll be using the wet on wet technique today to get the colors to blend and spread. In fact, that's kind of a key element to painting in these tulips. I'm really going to let the water and the paint do most of the work for me. So after I have this petal covered in a good amount of water, I'm going to take a touch of cadmium orange and just paint in a few areas. I'm not going to cover the entire petal quite yet. I might just try a little bit of this on the upper lip of the petal, as well as maybe a stripe down the center. Each time we paint in these petals, we're probably going to put this orange in a slightly different position. You can really kind of just play around with this and have some fun. All right, now I'll rinse my brush off and then take some of the nice, dark, concentrated alizarin crimson, and I'll start dropping this color in here while all of this is still wet. But this is the fun part. I'm really just going to let the paint and the water do the work. You'll notice that as I start to put this color in, it's just going to begin spreading very naturally on its own. I think I'll try placing this color in some sort of stripe-like movements, probably along the edges and maybe a couple in the center, just whatever you want to try. I am kind of trying to go around some of that orange color that we already have on here though, so we don't completely cover that up. Now we need to let that petal dry before we can paint right next to it, otherwise our petals are just going to bleed and blend into each other. So while we wait for that to dry, let's come down to the second tulip and do the same thing that we just did. So I'll wet down the petal first with some water, and then I'll start painting in a little bit of the orange and lastly some of the alizarin crimson. Again, I'm going to kind of just let the water and the paint do the work. I'll paint this color around maybe the edges of the petal with a couple of stripes down the center. But one tip with this is that more color tends to come off of the brush whenever you lift up on the brush. So if you don't want a lot of color spreading out, then keep your bristles down in one smooth movement onto the paper. If you would like some of the alizarin crimson to spread out more or be more prominent in an area, then you can lift up on the brush and then more paint is going to come out. Basically, we're going to be guiding the paint a little bit to where we want it to go, but then we're going to let it do its job and see what it creates. All right, very good. Now I've let both of these petals sit and dry a little bit, but now I can come back into the first tulip and paint the petal right next to this first one. But just like we've been doing, we're going to paint this in the same way with the water first, then adding in the orange and some stripes of alizarin crimson to finish it off. I'm going to jump back down to the bottom tulip and paint in the side petals down here while we let that upper flower dry a little bit more. But another tip I'm going to throw out is that as you start adding in more petals, you're going to want to keep them looking slightly separate than the other one that it's sitting right next to, meaning that I may have lighter values or darker values touching each other so that each petal stands out on its own. So since this middle petal seems to be a little bit lighter in value, I'm going to paint these two edge petals darker in value, especially where they touch each other. I hope you're enjoying this tutorial today. I really had a lot of fun with this one. It's really fairly simple in the look and the style, but we can turn out a really nice painting in the end. So if you're finding that you're enjoying my painting and teaching style today, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. All right, great job. Those turned out so awesome. It's kind of fun to let that water and paint do the work for you. You're never quite sure what you're going to end up with sometimes, but I love that about it. Even though you and I might be painting the exact same flower today, they are going to look completely different because of this, making each of our paintings unique and special. Let's go ahead and add in some greenery to these tulips next. So let's pull out some green colors that we'll use for this. First, I'll pull out some sap green. This can be our lighter, more highlight of a green color. And then for the darker green, let's pull out some hooker's green and maybe just mix in a touch of ivory black to that to make it even darker. So first up, let's paint in the stems of the tulips. These are fairly simple. I'm just going to load my brush with some sap green paint and then using the number 6 round. If I'm really careful, I can just press down on the bristles and paint this in one nice thick line of color to cover the entire space. I'm painting these wet on dry this time without any water on here first. Now, you can leave the stem just as it is, or if you'd like to add a little bit of extra dimension, you can take a touch of that darker hooker's green mixture and use just the very tip of your brush, or you can pull out one of the smaller brushes and add a little bit of this dark green off to one side of the tulip stem to create a shadow. Then I'll go ahead and paint in the other tulip stem in the exact same way. Great job! Let's go ahead and paint in the leaves of the tulips next. I'll start these out wet on dry as well, using some sap green. I'll paint in the smaller, more thin space or highlighted area of the leaf using this pure sap green color. Those spaces need to dry a little bit before moving on, but once as they are, then I'm going to take a little bit of water and paint in the second half of the leaf using the wet on wet technique. Now my brush still has a little bit of paint in here, but that's okay because we are going to be painting darker colors over the top of this. Mostly we just need to have a nice wet layer on here. Then after the space is all wet with water, I'll take some of the sap green color and paint that on the opposite side of the sap green area that we painted previously, and I'll let that blend and bleed into the space. Then while all of this is still wet, I'll take some of the darker Hooker's green paint mixture and put that in on the other side. This is going to create a really nice contrast as well as some depth and look of shadow. I'll also use a touch of this darker color to paint in some stripes or lines throughout the leaf just to create some added texture. Then I'll paint the second leaf in the same way. All right, very good. This is really coming together very nicely. Now to finish these leaves off, after they are completely dry, I'm going to pull out the thin #1 rigger brush and take a touch of green paint and just add in a few extra thin line stripes along these leaves to add to that look. So now that our tulips are completely done, all that's left is to paint in the rustic little branches with buds. I'll start these off by painting in the buds first. They're pretty small, so I'm going to switch over to the #3 round brush, and I'll take a touch of watered down cadmium orange that's already on our tray and paint in the entire space of the bud. Then while that orange color is still wet, I'll take a touch of the Alizarin crimson and just add and blend in a small amount of this color right at the base of the bud. This doesn't need to fill the entire shape. We're just adding a small hint and letting it blend in. I'll paint all of these buds in that same way. It shouldn't take a lot of time. Just keep them fairly quick and simple. All right, well done. All that's left to do is add in the twig branch that connects them all together. I'm going to pull out some burnt umber onto my tray and darken it up a little bit with some ivory black. Then after my color is mixed and ready to go, I'll pull out that #1 rigger brush once again and paint in some nice thin lines of color for the twigs, connecting all of the buds together. Now, these don't have to be perfectly straight lines. Having them a little crooked or jagged just adds some character, so don't stress too much about this. I might take a tiny bit of this brown color and just add a touch of it to the base of the buds to really fully connect the buds to the branch. And one last little detail that really adds some character to the piece, I'll paint in a few notches or knots of this brown color along the branch lines. And believe it or not, that is actually it for this painting today. Hopefully this wasn't too hard. My goal was to have it be a little bit more simple, maybe even a little bit quicker of a piece, but to still turn out with a beautiful painting. So I really hope you'll give this one a try. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.